good afternoon. Hello to all our participants. Thank you for joining us. My name is Lourdes Valenzuela. I'm the Regional Coordinator of SuSanA Latinoamérica. And today, together with Tomás Kipnis, are going to share 3 Latin American experiences in the management of fecal sludge. We want to promote the replication of these successful experiences in the region and share some insights that can contribute to the developing policies and strategies in other regions. Fecal sludge management is a subject full of challenges also in Latin American region. There are challenges in each and every link of the value chain, such as generation, collection, transport, and treatment, as well as regulatory and normative aspects which enable the monitoring of cleaning services, transport, and safe disposal of fecal sludge. On-site solutions are a viable option only if they are part of a sanitation value chain, is properly managed, including collection, transportation, treatment, and final use or disposal, all done safely. So we are delighted to be able to present the Latin American experience in FSM6. Latin America is characterized by its rapid urban development, which makes it difficult for sanitation services to keep pace. The problem is that despite the huge number of people using these technologies is in low and middle income cities, there are generally no established systems for the proper management of the accumulated fecal sludge. It is for this reason that fecal sludge management addresses a critical need, plays an essential role in sanitation management. The implementation of on-site solutions has reduced open defecation, but without proper management, they can still be harmful to the environment. For example, when a septic tank are not regularly emptied, sludge leaves the tank untreated and infiltrates into the ground, potentially polluting underground water. We know that decentralized technologies are by many factors the most sustainable alternative compared to sewage systems, which are expensive. It has been shown that the cost of fecal sludge management technologies is 5 times lower than conventional solutions of sewer in urban areas. In Latin America and the Caribbean, 60% of the population is served with sewerage, but there is a 40%, more than 190 million inhabitants who use different decentralized solutions and that require fecal sludge management. So now I give the floor to Tomás Kipnis. Hi, Tomás. Please talk to us about FSM characteristics in these countries.
Hello, thank you, Lourdes, and thank you for the invitation. Indeed, as you mentioned, on-site systems are very common in Latin America. And while there is a very large reliance on individual containment solutions, most of these systems have unsafe operation conditions, both at the containment stage and also collection, transportation, and treatment. So appropriating FSM is a very important aspect to deal with this current situation, that we have very big and critical deficits in terms of water and sanitation. So it is a game changer in this sense. And there have been several interesting initiatives related to containment solutions in the past decade in different countries in Latin America. But usually they are focused specifically in the containment stage. So how to implement low cost and accessible systems to rural and urban poor areas. But it's rare to see initiatives that takes into account the entire service chain. And this is a bit of the efforts that has been made by SuSanA with this development of these 3 case studies, which looked for larger scale and systemic implementation of FSM that would cover the entire service chain. So we will bring here 3 cases, one from Costa Rica in Aguatuya, another in Bolivia, Santa Cruz City, and another in Brazil, which takes into account the whole state of Rio Grande do Sul, which are very interesting cases. They have differences and similarities that hopefully can show a little bit of the stage that we are in Latin America at this stage with fecal sludge management. So we start with the case of Costa Rica.
So I will explain how is Costa Rica. Costa Rica is a country in Central America with 5 million inhabitants. It borders with Nicaragua and Panama. A quarter part of its area is protected forest, and it has tropical forests and coasts in the Caribbean and in the Pacific. The population of Alajuela is 300,000 inhabitants. Alajuela is located in the intertropical zone of the planet, close to the equator, but registered milder temperatures varying between a minimum of 50 Celsius in winter and a maximum of 32 Celsius degrees in summer, and mainly due to the altitude of 960 meters. Alajuela is the second most populated city in the country and is part of San Jose metropolitan area. So please, Tomás, explain us the technical aspects of fecal sludge management in Costa Rica.
Thank you. So this initiative takes into account fecal sludge management as a strategy both to accelerate sanitation coverage in Alajuela municipality in the short to medium term, and also to leverage resources for future expansion of the sewer networks. So as Lourdes mentioned, Alajuela is part of San Jose metropolitan area, and it is the second most populated city in the country. So roughly 300,000 inhabitants, from which 10% are in the rural area and 90% are in the urban area. This initiative was promoted mainly by the local municipality, which is the direct water and sanitation service provider, and the regulatory agency ARECEP. This initiative took place started in 2017 with the understanding that service provision could be offered through other solutions rather than sewage systems. This case study was developed based on information supplied directly by the municipal service coordinator and a few documents that were available regarding the regulation that they developed under this scope. So a little bit of the sanitation context. In Costa Rica, wastewater management needs to be coupled with wastewater management. Wastewater management needs to be coupled to water supply services, sorry. But at the same time that water supply has had major advances in the past decade, wastewater management still has critical deficits. Only 15 out of the 300,000 inhabitants, 15% has access to sewer lines. And the remaining share, 85%, count on on-site solutions from which a large share have unsafe containment structures or have inadequate fecal sludge management. This has major impact over the local water bodies, such as the Rio Grande de Tarcoles, and also has impact over the productive activities related to fishing, aquaculture, and irrigation. Another important point is the limited resources that are available to expanding the service coverage. So since only 15% of the population is actually covered with wastewater systems, there's only the equivalent collection of tariff to this 15%. So that's a restricted amount of resources. And also they don't have many financing options for that to happen. So in order to deal with this initiative aims to complement the conventional wastewater management repertoire with fecal sludge management service model, making it feasible to provide safe sanitation to the remaining share of Alajuela at more reasonable deadlines. So this diagram shows this initial perspective in which service through FSM will lead to an increase on the service coverage. That's on the short to medium term, but also in the medium to long term, as they collect more tariff due to greater coverage, there is increased financial capability for improvements. And also with this, they plan to extend their sewer networks to more densely occupied areas, not to everyone, but to areas that it might make more sense. And to do this, they focus on 3 lines of activities. First one is to update their local regulation to allow for fecal sludge management models to be possible. Implement a service model based on regular desludging and an adequate tariff system, and then implement proper fecal sludge treatment and reuse structures. The project started with initial studies regarding local conditions. It was very objective, a very objective phase, just to have a general idea of the population to be attended, a rough estimate of the fecal sludge production, the general situation of on-site containment solutions, and the situation of the collection and transportation service providers. After having a clear understanding of these aspects, they also started researching which kind of configurations and experiences there were out in the world related to FSM. And that led them to a first draft of the fecal sludge management service chain for their context. After this first draft, they had a very clear pathway to implement this. In one side, they started developing the required revisions in their local regulation related to sanitation, which culminated in the approval of the regulation in 2020 and the ratification of it in February 2021. And then another side refers to defining and implementing adapted sludge line, fecal sludge line in their existing wastewater treatment plant. This work was done a bit in parallel. With the regulation completely accepted, they will start organizing the regular desludging scheme with private collectors there, and they expect to start operations in the beginning of 2022. So a little bit of the solution. The solutions involved in this initiative, they refer to institutional arrangements, legal procedures, financial model, development of physical structures, and also defining proper operational routines. And the different stages in the service chain has different also levels of responsibilities from the municipality and the other organization involved in the chain. So when we're talking about containment, the registration and inspection, it refers specifically to the registration and inspection of on-site systems. So basically there is no distribution and installation of the systems is not part of the service model. So upon registration, they will also make use of the opportunity to inspect the quality and accessibility of the containment solutions and point out for improvements. At the collection and transportation, they will go for the scheduled desludging, and their scope is to collect 1 cubic meter every 2 years per household. So if they're considering 70,000 households and they have a limited hours of operation, so there's only 120 journeys per day to be done, they expect a flow of 120 cubic meters a day of sludge being collected. Their responsibility when it comes to this is to organize the scheduled desludging with the customers and also organize with the private companies the collection and transportation activities. When it comes to treatment, they will make use of the existing wastewater treatment plant, which is an activated sludge system. And the system can assimilate up to 60 cubic meter a day fecal sludge as it is today. So they also updated their sludge line with an adapted complementation to receive fecal sludge in a way that they can receive the 120 cubic meters a day. In terms of reuse, the treated sludge is already used on site for seedling production by the municipality Department of Green Areas. But in the future, they also expect to consolidate the donation or selling as soil conditioner for agriculture and forestry activities. And the liquid effluent, which is still directly discharged after treatment, it can also be exploited for irrigation. So a little bit of the treatment system that they have there. So fecal sludge arrives in the reception tank where they can control which line to direct the material. The wastewater line is composed, as I said, by activated sludge system. And the sludge line, which they adapted specifically to the fecal sludge, starts with a calcium oxide addition to raise pH to above 11. Then it goes to a pre-treatment step with sieves and grit tank. Then it follows to a mixing tank where it also mixes with the waste activated sludge. And also in this tank, they have coarse bubble aeration. From this, it goes to the thickening and gravity thickeners and the drying. They have screw press for the drying, but the screw press doesn't have capacity for the entire volume, so the entire flow. So they have additional added drying beds to complement the systems. The liquid fraction goes back to the wastewater line, and the solid goes to the reuse in the seedlings greenhouse. This picture shows a little bit of their installations there. So about the other aspects of the solutions, in terms of regulation, ARECEP, which is the regulatory agency, was responsible for developing the revisions and approving the new regulation, and also to update their procedures to properly follow the fecal sludge management services by the municipality. In terms of financial aspects, the systems that they've designed is uncoupled from the water supply tariff. It's a dedicated model for fecal sludge management. And their main goal was to have collection costs smaller than what the conventional and the existing private service providers would offer. They got to a cost of $4.25 per month per household, which means $102 per dislodging event, which is every 2 years. And that is a lower price than there is from the private service provider, which range from $120 to $200. So not only the price is a bit smaller, but they are also paying this in installments, not at once. So this is a good point. And finally, regarding some complementary actions, they focused on communication campaigns to engage population to the new service model, and also bring awareness about how to build and operate proper on-site systems. And all this they've done through social media, website, and distribution of brochures and banners. So just to summarize the distribution of responsibilities in this case, the municipality of Aguatuya is responsible for organizing and monitoring the fecal sludge collection and transportation by the private companies. It is fully responsible for the wastewater and the fecal sludge treatment, and also for the sludge reuse activities. ARECEP is responsible for the regulation of the services and providing any updates that is needed to the reference documents and directives. The private dislodging companies are responsible to perform the dislodging activities respecting the directives from the municipality and regulatory authority. And the customers remain responsible for the installation and maintenance of the systems, just as attending for scheduled dislodging and paying their tariffs. So this is it for the case of Costa Rica. Now we move on to case of Bolivia, Santa Cruz.
Okay, dear Thomas, we already have just 2 answers for this first case. Maybe we can just quickly have give an answer. The first one is, do the toilets in Alajuela include flush water? Are the tanks water thick or do they drain?
Oh yeah, I'm trying to find the question. I didn't understand exactly. So if it,
you have to activate the chat. We have one question in the chat and one in question and answers. Then later I'm gonna.
Okay. If the Sludge first, can you? There are many questions in the chat. If you can read the first one again. Sorry.
Do the toilets in Alajuela include flush water? Are the tanks water thick or do they drain? Or maybe you prefer response to all the question at the end.
Yeah, perhaps it's better if we systemize it, and because if you could add this question to the questions Q&A part, because I didn't understand if the question was if rainwater is, if stormwater goes together with the wastewater. I didn't get it. But okay.
Dear attendees, please, your questions, you have to make it in the question and answers icon below to the presentation, please. And on other comments for the participants, we can use the chat. So let's let Thomas take a breath, and I'm going to explain how is Bolivia. Bolivia is the heart of South America with 11 million inhabitants. It's a Mediterranean country. 2/3 of the country is Amazonic and 1/3 is plateau. With an area of more than 1 million square kilometers, is located within the tropical zone of the globe. The country's climate is characterized by a great thermal amplitude due to the great difference in altitude and the diversity of reliefs. The country is unitary state, divided into 9 departments. The department of Santa Cruz being the largest in territorial extension and one of the richest in the country. So Santa Cruz have humid tropic climate with an average temperature of 26 Celsius degrees. And the population of Santa Cruz is 3 million inhabitants, with 1.9 million people in its metropolitan area, distributed in 6 municipalities: Santa Cruz da Sierra, Warnes, Porongo, Cotoca, La Guardia, and El Torno. Now I give the floor to Tomás for the technical aspect in FSM.
Thank you, Lourdes. So this initiative is basically the development of a pilot project, the design of this pilot project, in order to improve the FSM service chain in Santa Cruz City, especially in the peri-urban areas. So as Lourdes mentioned, the metropolitan area that includes Santa Cruz has 1.9 million inhabitants. It's also the financial center for the country. It's responsible for 35% of the gross national product. It's also one of the cities with the greatest demographic growth in the world. And that's, as I will speak a bit more to the front, is one of the main issues related to sanitation. Just to give a reference, Bolivian urban population might reach 72% in 2025. This initiative was promoted by a series of organizations, started with the Water and Environmental Ministry and the Potable Water and Sanitation Surveillance Authority, APS. This was done along with the local service providers, Saguapac and Copaguas, also with the participation of Adeltar, which is the local association for the desludging and transportation companies. and the state and municipal governments of Santa Cruz. All this was done with the support, technical and financial support from the World Bank and GIZ. This initiative took place between 2017 and 19, and the development of this case study was possible by the extensive amount of materials that the project produced, very comprehensive studies, and we also had the support from the project consultant, Luis Sevilla. So the purpose of this initiative is to improve sanitation conditions in Santa Cruz through maturating the FSM service chain and building proper local capacity for operation and continuous improvement. So they really focused on having supporting actions and conditions to maintain the systems properly throughout time. This focus is to promote safe containment solutions, qualify and organize the collection and transportation stages, create an adequate treatment facilities, and also develop proper reuse practice for the fecal sludge. And this pilot focuses mainly on these different aspects that are listed there, very important supporting actions, which refers to awareness and capacity building, development and diffusion of guidelines and standards, complementing existing regulations, defining inspections and monitoring procedures, improving existing infrastructure, such as roads and the treatment plants itself, the strategic distribution of responsibilities and supporting the appropriation of these responsibilities by each actor, and also extend the knowledge to enable both safe and sustainable reuse practices. The project steps, so it had those three essential phases from diagnosis, prognosis, and implementation plan. In this case, the diagnosis was a very in-depth assessment of the current situation of the different steps of the fecal sludge management service chain. So amount of fecal sludge generated and what are the conditions in which they're generated, the situation of the containment structures, what are the desludging dynamics, situation of the existing collection and transportation services, conditions for fecal sludge treatment in their existing treatment plants, and if there were any reuse or disposal practices that could be improved. From this diagnosis, they managed to identify the main focus points for improvements, and that was translated in the next stage of the design of the pilot initiative into 5 main components, which are first refers to the containment structures and maintenance dynamics. The second to the improvement of the collection and transportation activities. The third to structuring proper disludge offloading and treatment. The fourth refers to produce enough knowledge to ground proper reuse practices. And the fifth, which is horizontal to all the other components, is the communication and knowledge management strategies. And of course, this phase also distributes the responsibilities amongst the different involved actors. And from this, they managed to advance already on an implementation plan. And for each of the actions in each of the 5 components, they did a prioritization in the timeline for each action based on the duration of the implementation and their deadlines. And they also managed to estimate the budget. This plan was developed considering a 2-year time frame. So a little bit of the results from the diagnosis. The sanitation services in Santa Cruz have advanced expressively, but has not managed to keep up with the fast growth of urban population. As we mentioned earlier, it is one of the greatest growing cities there is. And of course, the slow implementation rhythm of sewer systems is a challenge for that. So there is 1.5 million inhabitants based on 2012 census. So nowadays, probably much more than this. From this, only 51% of the population has access to the sewer services. This green area, white in the figure, is the more condensed urban area, which is supplied with sewer lines. The gray part on the outskirts is the peri-urban area, which mainly rely on on-site solutions. The on-site solutions refer to 46% of the urban population. That's roughly more than 150,000 households. It's a lot, and only a small share of this generated sludge is properly treated. So 30% of the households have declared that they have desludging activities, only 30%. And this with an average frequency of 2 years. 28% out of this 38% are made by desludging service providers and 2% manually. Another aspect is that there's only one plant in the region that is able to receive the collected material. That's Polindustrial treatment plant from one of treatment plants from Saguapac. And the third aspect is that from the 21 small to medium private companies that they identified that conduct desludging activities, most of them operates without standards or safety protocols. So the solutions that they designed based on this were divided in two main groups. One of primary activities, which are the physical structure and the service provision routines on itself, and also supporting activities, which refer to institutional arrangements, communication strategies, capacity building, and development of standard guidelines and regulations. So I'll speak a bit of this service chain in the next slide. When we're talking about containment, this solution includes improving the containment solutions through training and certifying professionals for construction, building standardized protocols also for the construction and maintenance, and the procedures to be performed by the service providers refer to the registration of the households, and just like in Costa Rica, also inspect the conditions of the system and advise regarding necessary improvements, and also monitor the desludging that is performed at the household level. For the collection and transportation, the solutions refer to development of protocols, both for equipment and operations control. Also development of rules for the truck's operation. So adding identification number for each truck with technical information, putting identification plate on the truck's tank, performing tank inspections, and also making use of satellite monitoring systems. Besides this, they expect to have trainings for the operators and also certify the professionals. In terms of treatment, the improvement of the offloading and treatment stages refers mainly to the definition of two independent systems for fecal sludge treatment, one for each service provider, one for Saguapac and another for Copavas, and also improve the road's access to these treatment plants. In supporting actions to this, they plan to prepare and revive fecal sludge discharge, characterization, and monitoring procedures, and also, just as in the other stages, properly train the professional for these activities, including the sampling and analyzing fecal sludge material. When it comes to the reuse stage, the main action refers to create enough groundings so that these practices can be implemented safely. For this, they've developed and stimulated the tests for scalable business model for resource recovery through biofuel, fertilizer, animal feeding proteins, etc. They also developed risk evaluation studies for related to these activities, both to human health and environmental risks, and also bring which should be the mitigation procedures for each one of these risks. And finally, stimulated private initiatives for technological innovation for the reuse practices. So just a little print on this is one of the treatment trains that they have in wastewater treatment plant in the industrial sector, Etar Polo Industrial. And this is the system that they proposed to include an adapted and dedicated fecal sludge line. The system would be comprised of a reception tank, which then would move on to a pre-treatment step with sieves and grit tank. From that, it goes to thickening, gravity thickener, and then drying beds. The liquid fraction goes back to the treatment line that exists in parallel. In this case, it is facultative lagoons. And the solid share moves on to co-composting and then reuse. A very important aspect of this project refers to the communication and knowledge management strategies. For that, they've produced videos, banners, social media. They have a very rich Facebook channel with many videos and actively fed materials. Also participation on events such as Expo Cruz, which is an important event in Santa Cruz. And through that, they've been managing to build awareness on fecal sludge management. These pictures here portray this very interesting strategy with the creation of characters. So this is Fecalito, which is basically fecal sludge when it's still retained, it's still contained. This is the one that needs to be saved. The bad guy here is Charco, which is the sludge that is not anymore contained, it's outside in the environment. And the hero is Manguerita, which is basically the hose that will collect charco and safely directly to take it to treatment. It was a very successful strategy for them, for their part. Besides that, they've been developing environmental awareness campaigns and diffusion for the guidelines and standards for on-site containment systems. Also developing specific campaigns to engage targeted communities. So not only population that will be attended by this service model, but also the ones that might be close to treatment plants or other points of impact. And finally, a very important point, which is systemizing and diffusing the experiences of the project. This is important. It's basically one of the essential purposes of a pilot project, which is to extend the learnings and the experiences to other regions and countries. So another important strategy that they implemented refers to the management of the pilot project. So in order to manage it and assure effectiveness of the initiative, they define a group of strategic functions to follow the implementation continuously. These functions include interinstitutional coordination, technical and administrative support, continuous monitoring, and external evaluation. Also, they defined a technical coordination committee to supervise and control the project goals. This committee is comprised of the same utilities that are promoters in this initiative, which is the water and sanitation utilities, Aguapaca and Copaguas, the Desludging Companies Association, Adeltar, also the Water Environmental Ministry and the Potable Water and Sanitation Surveillance Authority, and the municipal and state governments. To give a brief summary of the distribution of responsibility in this case, the National Ministry for Water and Environmental Ministry is responsible for regulation at national level, also for investments and technical assistance. When we go to regulation at state level or other levels, it is responsibility from the Potable Water and Sanitation Surveillance Authority. The same authority is responsible to coordinate together with the state government and municipal governments that the activities performed by service suppliers are in compliance to the regulations. They are also responsible for conceiving licenses for the activities. The infrastructure investment in inspection and control are mainly provided by the municipal governments. So that's the first point of entrance for budget and also for the inspection and control activities. Doesn't mean that they don't have support from other government levels. And finally, the water and sanitation utility and the desludging companies, they have to provide their services respecting this general regulation directives. To wrap this case up, the cost and financial aspects are that the plan delivered. So we're not talking about observed costs, we're talking about estimated costs for the project implementation, which have been estimated to $1,650,000. It is interesting here not to see so much of the absolute figures because this changes throughout time, but the percentage of and distribution of these resources throughout the different components. Of course, the offloading and treatment systems, which are the main structural solutions involved in this case, in this scope, is responsible to 66% of the investments. But it's interesting to see that supporting activities such as communication and knowledge management, and also the pilot project management they also need a large share of investment. So this was important to see, and it's not just about structural measures. Okay, so this was it for the Santa Cruz case study, and we can move on to the one from Brazil.
Okay, so dear participants, please use the Q&A option for your questions. And for the discussion later, we could also consider giving attendees the option to unmute and ask their questions. You just need to raise their hand and then we let you speak. So Brazil. Brazil is a vast country in South America that stretches from the Amazon basin in the north to vineyards and the massive Iguazu Falls in the south. With a population of 200 million inhabitants, is the largest country in South America. Rio Grande do Sul has a population of 11 million inhabitants, just as Bolivia, and have a humid subtropical climate. The annual average temperature of the state varies between 14 and 22 Celsius degrees. Precipitation is well distributed through the year. So located in the extreme south of the country, the state of Rio Grande do Sul borders Argentina to the west, Uruguay to the south, and the state of Santa Catarina to the north. With approximate area of more than 280,000 square kilometers, the demographic density of the state is 42.2 inhabitants per square kilometer, the largest in the south and the third largest of the 27 federative units of the country. So finally, Tomás, talk to us about your country.
Lourdes. So this initiative refers to the complementation of the service provision repertoire with regular desludging and fecal sludge treatment. This refers to all the municipalities attended by Corsã, which is the state service provider. So Rio Grande do Sul state has 459 municipalities. As Lourdes mentioned, 11.4 million inhabitants, from which 17% live in rural areas and 83% in urban areas. These percentages might not portray how rural this state is, because 17% is not such a big value, but If we look at these figures here, 47% of the state municipalities have greater rural population than urban, and that's a lot. So this initiative was promoted by the state sanitation company Corsã, together with the state regulatory agency AGERS and the Federation of Municipal Association FAMUS. The initiative was started between 2015 and 2017. It was designed in 2018 and approved to start operation in 2019. And this case study was developed based on information supplied directly by Corsã and also their promoting materials about the project and documents that supported the development of regulation. So a little bit of the sanitation context. Only 38.6% of the state population are officially covered by sanitation services. This is data from 2019. If we look specifically to the urban population, this share is equivalent to 48% of the population. And in the rural areas, this is 8.8%, so much less. There's an expressive reliance on on-site solutions. 37% of the households in the entire state, both urban and rural areas, rely on individual containment solutions. And besides, we can of course expect that this is in large share in the rural areas, but also in the most densely occupied urban areas, there is a 7% share that also relies on on-site solutions. Just to give a reference in relation to the national picture, over 30% of the population in Brazil rely on on-site containment solutions. That's 63 million inhabitants. In the rural areas specifically, it is 80% relies on on-site solutions. And in the urban areas, this figure is 12%. Something that I forgot to say is that Corsã is responsible for the sanitation in 275 municipalities in the state. That is equivalent to 60% of the state municipalities, which is a lot. So the purpose and scope of this project is to make sanitation services more accessible to regions where sewer networks are not technically or financially feasible. And this done through the implementation of fecal sludge management systems. For that, they focus on updating the regulation. They also have defined municipal legal procedures for the municipalities to legally receive the fecal sludge management models. So implementing laws, adding this repertoire to the sanitation master plan, and also updating the sanitation service provision contracts with Corsã. Other than this, they have developed a very technical and in the financial aspects for a new service model. They have restructured their operating schemes to include scheduled desludging procedures, and also they're planning on building treatments infrastructure, both as co-treatment in existing treatment plants with a specific sludge line, or entirely new plants dedicated for fecal sludge treatment. And fecal sludge management is being considered in this case both as a provisory solution or as a definitive solution, depending on the local conditions. And this is to be applied in rural areas, low density urban areas, and even at densely occupied urban areas, depending on the local conditions. The project steps related to this project is, Corsã in 2015 started questioning why can't we account for the population that has access to individual containment solutions into our coverage index values. So, and also what do we need to do for that to happen? How can we make this official so that we can include this into our coverage performance. After this questions, it led to the understanding of the potentials of fecal sludge management to accelerate both the sanitation services and improve the population conditions, but also to improve the company's performance. That led to the conception and planning, in which it was systemized the factors and possibilities for the arrangement, and it also identified the actions that needed to be done to implement this model. And that led to the service model design, which where they defined how the tariff model would work, which are the procedures, what are the institutional arrangements to make this happen inside Corsã. And to validate all this, they also implemented a pilot project in one of their small districts to assure that the values that they estimated are coherent to reality. After they validated this, they went to the implementation stage. And the implementation itself had different stages. First thing is to update the regulation. That is the main bottleneck of the system. After that, also develop procedures for the municipalities to update their sanitation master plan and include fecal sludge management as one of the options in the repertoire. Also, add this specific scope in their contract with Corsã. And after this is done, then they can start operation. So far, they started operation in 2 municipalities. That's back in 2020. And they expect to expand this to 22 other municipalities by the end of 2022. In the medium term, of course, all those 275 municipalities could be helped by the fecal sludge management. But this, of course, is a very long shot, because 225 is a lot of municipalities, but it's in their medium to long-term goals. So a little bit of the description for the solutions. Just as in Costa Rica, the solutions refer to institutional arrangements, legal procedures, financial model, and development of physical structures and proper operational routines. And throughout the different stages of the service chain, they have a certain amount of responsibility for Corsã and for the customers and different service providers. So when we're talking about the containment step, the main actions performed by Corsã here is to have an initial communication and a program disclosure to the customers, then actually performing the registration of the households in their system, and making use of this registration moment also to inspect the current condition of the containment solutions and advise regarding possible improvements on their systems. And together with this, diffuse the existing standards which we have for the containment systems to be built and operated. For the collection and transportation, so we have regular dislodging as the main strategy. And the Corsã will be responsible for the scheduled collection services and also booking additional dislodging demands when necessary. They will define the collection routes and synchronize the activities with the different private operators for the dislodging activities and monitor the services. About the treatment, the situation, since they're a statewide initiative, they leave this open to each municipality. Each location will have determined set of conditions, which will point out if the best way is to co-treat with wastewater, depending on the fecal sludge generation, or if the situation would justify the implementation of fecal sludge treatment plant. They even have made a theoretical design for a fecal sludge treatment plant to attend 3 municipalities together. But unfortunately, the land where they designed this was not available, so this is not happening for now. And in terms of reuse, which they haven't developed so much into it, so it's just as future perspective. But since Rio Grande do Sul is a state with a lot of agricultural production, probably the treated sludge will have a lot of potential for use in agricultural purposes. So a little bit of what they've done with the financial aspects of which was quite interesting. So firstly, they designed the operational costs, and they arrived at the minimum value that they should charge households per month in order to be financially sustainable. And that's $4.45 US per household per month. But that doesn't mean that this is charged for every household. In Rio Grande do Sul, just as in entirely Brazil and other countries in Latin America, we have huge inequality indexes. So it is common in Brazil that we have social tariffs and basic tariffs. So it's different. The cost is different for low incomes and high incomes families. And what they need to do in the model is to balance based on the estimated population in low income and high income, to balance to assure that 4.45 general average is assured. So the outcome they had is that the social tariff would be $3.47 US per month, while the basic residential and commercial areas are 8.77 US a month. Just as a comment, these are not cheap or very accessible tariffs for now. It is expressively more expensive than what they pay for wastewater services nowadays, but it is an important step for sure. And they are already working on as they start operating, how they can refine their systems and reduce this cost so that the operational cost also is dropped, and then they drop the tariffs as well. So just a fast summary of the redistribution of responsibilities in this case. Municipalities, so the local authorities, are responsible to decide if this regular desludging model can be applied in their territory. If so, they need to update their sanitation master plan and approve it by law, and then also update the service provision contract with Corsan. On the regulation end, AGERS is responsible both for updating the regulation documentation and also update their procedures to properly follow Corsan's activity. Corsan is responsible for a large share of procedures, from the communication with customers to booking, scheduled desludging and routing the collection and transportation. Also registering and inspecting the on-site containment solutions, organizing the monitoring of the collection and transportation activities. They're fully responsible for the treatment and destination of the fecal sludge, and also for charging the tariff for the systems. The hired desludging companies will be responsible for collection and transportation, following Corsan's and AGER's directives. And the customers, just as in the other two previous cases, they keep on being responsible for the installation and maintenance of the containment solutions. In this case, there are specific standards that they already have to follow. Besides that, they need to attend to the scheduled desludging according to the Corsan's timeline and proceed with the proper payment of the tariff. Okay, so this was about the three cases that we've disclosed. I think before we go to the questions, I'll just bring some final considerations about this, because we have three very interesting cases. They have many similarities, but also peculiar setups. So in the case of Alajuela, they had a very practical approach. They focused directly into the development of the new regulation, and in parallel already retrofitting their treatment plant to improve their capacity. So it was a very organic way without spending a lot of time in studies, and so they, with just a minimum amount of information, they went straight to action, which is very different than what was done in Santa Cruz, in which they have done a very in-depth study about the local conditions with primary assessments and all, and led to a very comprehensive study with supporting action. So it's not only the services, operation procedures and structures, it's all the set of activities that need to be done to assure sustainability throughout time. And the case in Brazil had also a detailed study, mainly focused on the financial model related to the operational procedures. And also, just as in Costa Rica, had a very extensive formulation for the new regulation. So a lot of their learnings refer to how important it is to engage different actors in this approval process with the ministry, public ministry, and the regulation authorities. So despite the differences, they also have many similarities, especially relating to learnings that they all got. So even though at different levels, they all include in communication and engagement strategies, and they acknowledge it as crucial aspects for the activities, the initiatives to be effective. And also, in all cases, this regulation approval was a key factor, even a bottleneck, and should be a very challenging process. So it is important to bring a lot of efforts to that and bring the maximum amount of engaged actors from the start, so that everyone feels part of it and there are not discordances in more advanced phases of this approval process. Also, there are some aspects related to the engaged actors between the different initiatives. All of them included water and sanitation utilities and regulatory agencies as key players in the initiative. They started from scratch. Local municipalities were there for the case of Costa Rica and Bolivia. In the case of Brazil, since it's a state level, it was represented by the Association of Municipalities. Nevertheless, whenever the implementation starts in one specific municipality, it is their call to accept or not, and then to supervise and plan the activities, not the services, but how this will be implemented. Also, another part that was interesting is that only in the case of Bolivia that these sledging companies were part of the initiative elaboration. In the case of Costa Rica and in Brazil, they are seen as part of the process, but they did not take place inside the elaboration committees. And probably this shows the importance of this sector of suppliers to actually organize themselves, because I believe in Rio Grande do Sul and in Alajuela, there were not necessarily this association of these ledgers to be a part of it. And also a few interesting aspects about the treatment, about the service chain. When we're talking about the containment, all the cases refer mainly to registration and inspection of on-site solutions. So the installation or financing of this containment structures is not part of the scope in any of the cases. And also in Bolivia, the actions include the creation of standards and training for construction professionals to be have better capability to implement the systems and then replicate with greater quality. In terms of collection and transportation, scheduled desludging was crucial both for Brazil and Costa Rica. That's the turning point so that they can match the fecal sludge management to what they are used to, which is the monthly tariff system. And in Bolivia, it was initially considered to have a call center to organize the service demand and supply. But this, based on the project consultant, apparently they did not implement yet. For the treatment, all cases considered both co-treatment strategies and fecal sludge treatment, but at the first stages, they all go for co-treatment, so making use of existing strategies, making use of existing facilities. And also, it was interesting to see that only in the case of Bolivia that they really put in more effort into identifying the need of new protocols that are different from wastewater treatment to adapt for fecal sludge management. And in terms of reuse, in general, most of all the initiatives are in incipient stages of implementation, even though they are all open for it and there are great opportunities, but they are structuring in a way that they can develop mainly for agricultural purposes. Okay, so this is done actually. Let me stop sharing.
Okay, thank you, Tomás.
I'm ready for the questions.
Yes, we have had 5 questions and we have already tried to answer them in the option of question and answer. I don't know if you can open this option, Q&A, but you can see all the answers and questions also. But I want, if anyone feels that their question has not been answered, please raise your hand and I will unmute you and to do the option to say your question. I think.
Yeah, should I go? So there are 6 questions, right? The first one.
And then you go next answer. We have tried to answer with Paola
okay.
The questions. That is why I'm asking to the attendees that you can raise your hand if you believe that we have not answered your question. So I will give you the option that you can speak. I think one question is, there are two questions. Stefan Reuter is not, I'm gonna give the word to Stefan Reuter, okay? Please.
Let me see. Now the microphone is on. Thank you very much for excellent session. Congratulations to the Latin America team. Well done. So Tomás, you mentioned that the regulator at parts can also become a bottleneck. So what is the process? And you mentioned it may take time. I'm interested in that because in many parts of the world, regulation is underway. So what was striking you when comparing the regulatory process of the different, and in which way was it a bottleneck? Thank you.
Yes, I don't know if the way I spoke, it's not the regulators that are bottlenecks, but the regulation process. So the approval of the new regulation was a major, demanded a lot of efforts. So in the case of Costa Rica, I think it took 2 years and then one extra to approve it, and then 1 extra year to actually ratify it so that they can officially operate. In the case of Brazil, so you have a different set of actors that need to be involved in the discussions for it to be approved, and I don't understand exactly what are the legal procedures for that. But what they found is that if there is one actor that is not in accordance to it, they already have to get back on it with a few steps back and redo certain clauses. Some certain aspects of the regulation need to be revised, and so what they learned is that they really need to include all the actors from the beginning so that it's designed all at once without a lot of pre-work. Also, what it was identified in the case of Bolivia by the project consultant is that they, once the politics, the people that are elected, so the not executive team, but the people that change with elections, once the team is substituted by another, a lot of rework needs to be done because all the effort was with specific people, and then you have to brief the whole thing. Some people will not agree with previously approved aspects, so it is not a trivial, what I meant is that it's really not a trivial step. It is a bottleneck in the sense that you really need to, if you don't approve, you cannot officially put this into motion, and it's not a very simple process.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Did I answer your question? Sort of.
Absolutely. Thank you, Thomas. Next one.
Okay, so I'm thinking.
There was one question about who is the regulatory body to person. That's, let me show you. AGERS is the regulatory body for the entire state of Rio Grande do Sul water and sanitation services. This was this question from Stefan.
From Stefan, okay. Then we have some questions that haven't been answered. Peter Hawkins, hi Peter. Do you want to talk? I allow you to talk, and please do your question.
Thank you, Lourdes. Yeah, no, I was interested to hear Thomas say that the tariff for fecal sludge collection was actually greater than for the sewage tariff. I've forgotten which case that was.
Yeah,
I was quite surprised by that, because I mean, in general, we know that it's the opposite. I mean, I suppose the operational costs for fecal sludge management can be higher, but the huge capital cost of sewerage in comparison would make a cost-covering tariff in most situations a lot greater.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And also it makes complete sense that if we look at the structures in terms of operational costs, also we expect fecal sludge approaches to bring smaller costs. Perhaps due to the initial stages of this and in the context there and what they are testing, still it's greater. But the thing is, so they have 4.45 average cost per month US dollars. That's roughly 25 reais to 30 reais. Wastewater services in Brazil are coupled to the water supply. So basically they multiply by 2 the water consumption. And the consumption really, especially in low incomes, in low income family, this is 10 reais, should be $2 US. And so the social tariff would be $2 US, and in their case, it's 3.48 for fecal sludge. And when we're not talking about the social tariff, there are different variations depending on the level, the amount of water that is consumed by potable water consumed. And it usually does not trespass 20 or 25 for a small household. So it might be that many households will have larger bills, and in this case, fecal sludge tariff might be smaller. But the fact is that even though we expect fecal sludge through scheduled desludging to be cheaper than conventional wastewater services, in their tariff model, it is a little bit more expensive still. I hope that, and I really think that as they try and refine their processes, they will drop this value. And just to get on with this, this point, their level of responsibility is not as, they have very objective responsibilities. So they're not even having specific responsibilities regarding the containment steps and the reuse stages still. So when this is included in the model, this might also shift a bit for better or worse.
Hey, Peter, did we answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if actually the way that capital expenditure is financed for the sewerage is entirely transparent, and whether some of the presumably some of the investments in sewerage come through transfers from the federal system. You know, these always in Brazil. I mean, the politicians are running around trying to grab money in Brasilia. That's how it works. And is that money accounted through the state sanitation company, or is that kind of extra, and therefore not included in depreciation? I mean, it's the depreciation charge, which is the expensive part of sewage.
So I didn't understand the question. I understood the part with the politicians, which it is really here in Brazil.
No, the question,
I didn't get...
I mean, the big cost of sewage is the capital cost, and that is represented in the accounts by a depreciation charge. I was just wondering whether that is the way that the sanitation company actually does its accounts, or whether such monies, you know, from other sources are just, you know, they're written off essentially in the accounts.
Oh, indeed, it is very complex. I still didn't manage to have a clear comprehension of how they design their models, because in some cases it appears that for a certain level of interventions and construction of new structures, the utilities are responsible for it. So then they need to take into account with their operational costs and the tariffs that they collect. But also there are cases in which the municipalities or the state governments are making the investments. So it's really complex, and each municipality has one arrangement. And I don't know if you've been following the recent reframing of the national regulation and legislation for sanitation in Brazil, but it is a bit even messier how this will work between private and public service utilities, and really I think there is a big variation on how they constitute the service models, the tariff models. I couldn't really understand if there is like defined 2 routes or 3 routes for them to design it. I think each case they do it as they please.
You know, I've discussed with Perry Nazareth, who's one of the consultants I think involved in. There's a consultant called Perry Nazareth who used to be at Brasilia, who is doing some work, in fact, in Rio Grande do Sul, he said. And yes, he said it's not at all transparent how they are structuring this. So anyway, thank you.
These big state companies, they've been in the since I think the decade of the 70s. They've been responsible for the majority of the municipalities, and they were almost 100% sure that they would renew their contracts with the municipalities. They have a lot of, they used to have a lot of privilege to keep on with the services in the localities, independent from their performance. So there is a lot of issues and complete lack of transparency. Sabesp in São Paulo, where I live, it is tricky. There are many great sanitation companies in terms of technical aspects and even will, but it's so complex, and I think it comes from a complicated story other times, that they're still shifting to a more coherent and it's on the go, but still very complex.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you to you, Peter, to join to this session. So, okay, I'm going to give the word to Constantine. Hi, Constantine. Nice to have you here.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Thomas and Lourdes, for the great presentations. And yeah, I found it as a very interesting session and very refreshing, very different. So thank you very much for all the insights. I really enjoyed it, although it's quite late on my side. I just wanted to ask the question of maybe I didn't understand correctly with all the reported data, but if it's cheaper to charge for sewer services, why is not the entire population serviced by sewer centralized type of treatment services? I mean, I understand the complexity, but it just maybe to bring us into more context. Is it inaccessible areas, or is it informal settlements, slum types of settlements, or are you looking in the long run to cover to bring the costs down for fecal sludge treatment and try to decentralize the existing situation? Maybe you can tell us a little bit more just to understand the concept about it. Thank you.
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Tina. First, with not through this initiative, but last year, me and a group, we published one study in which we compared the decentralized and centralized implementation and operational costs for localities with different occupation densities. And we found that for densities below 41 inhabitants per hectare, we would for sure have a greater feasibility for the decentralized dispositions. We considered a time frame of 25 operational years. And this 41 inhabitants per hectare is the situation of over 80% of the municipalities in Brazil. So it is, there are, in terms of situation, small municipalities rarely will find a greater feasibility on sewage systems in comparison to the fecal sludge. The fact is, when you go to urbanized centers, it is very common that you have regular roads and good topography in some shares of it. So they get investments and resources to implement the sewer systems, but then they have the isolated districts, the rural areas, the peri-urban areas with smaller densities, and also the slum areas which have no regular occupation performance. And these areas are usually not attended by sewers. So they either find financial or technical challenges in the way. When you started your question, sorry, my dog. Oh, sorry about this. When we go to the costs of sewer systems, it is common that we have investments. I think, as Peter mentioned, the government is investing and giving funds without the need to return the funds. So you can build entire sewer systems and treatment plants without needing to include those costs in the service model, operational procedures, and the tax collection. So in the end of the day, you are not, it's not, it doesn't speak to the case of Corsan, in which they developed a tariff based on their operational costs and implementation costs. In the case of wastewater management, in this case, is in which they receive the resources from abroad, or not abroad, but from national governments, such in Brazil we had with PAC program, with Dilma and Lula, a lot of investments with this, and they didn't need to return this investment. So that's something they get, and they don't need to necessarily to be paid for those, for that investment. And since we have a very small rate of treatment from all the the collected wastewater, that's also an important thing. The operational costs are not too much nowadays. So we have roughly, in average, I think 50% of the collected sludge is not treated. So also this plays a part, I guess.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Thank you.
Thank you, Constantine, to be here in this session. So someone else to want to raise your hand, I can give you now the word. Well, maybe we have some questions that we didn't answer right. Maybe Janet Nevlin, do you want maybe the word? Or Grover? If you raise your hand, I can give you the word. Okay. Sorry. Grover. Grover.
Hey, everybody.
Hi.
Thanks for the presentation and for sharing the experiences. So I had a couple of questions. One was a little bit more technical, which was partially answered, related with the co-treatment, fecal sludge and wastewater in an activated sludge treatment system. So it was mentioned that you first mix with carbon dioxide to increase the pH, and my question was, how does it affect on the performance of the activated sludge? Does it has any effect? And also on the sludge, like considering you have a high pH sludge, so is there any options for reuse with that type of sludge? Did you face any problems on that regard? And the second question was related with the sustainability aspect. In most of the cases you mentioned that the main source of income to operate the system of fecal sludge management would be tariff based, so the users will have to pay. But have you looked at any other alternatives on creating a different source of income, like for example, reusing or selling, making commercial options on the byproducts after the treatment? So if that's the case, can you share the experiences? Which technologies do you think have been worked better, or the case studies are not yet at that stage? So those were my questions, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Very good questions. Yes, I'll start from the last part. The case studies are not yet in this stage. As I mentioned, they are very incipient in their reuse practices. We, in Brazil, just recently, the sludge reuse, the reuse standards for agriculture has been updated, and it makes more feasible in the bureaucratic pathway to have this recovery processes, but still not too many initiatives in place. And both Costa Rica and in Brazil, they are still not operating. But for sure, once they are with some time of operation, they can start implementing pilot tests in directing their sludge to specific industries or agricultural purposes. And there is this discussion. They can sell it and get additional resources and offset it from the tariff. But at the same time, even if they don't have the cost to take this sludge elsewhere, and well, here they have to pay to put it in sanitary landfills. So if already they donate the sludge and stop having that cost, the operational cost will drop, and they should be able to drop their tariff as well. But there is no guarantee, and this I've seen in a discussion a few years back in the regarding wastewater, is that not necessarily if they drop their operational costs with energy efficiency measures or resource recovery, it doesn't mean that they will guaranteedly drop their tariff. That has a bit to do with the point from Peter. There is a little bit of a blind spot there in how they do this model. So it should be possible in the short term to have some offsetting of the costs. But how this would translate to the tariff, I'm not so sure. And regarding the treatment, I also, first time I spoke to the guys in Costa Rica, it called my attention, this treatment train, because you add pH, you add calcium oxide in the beginning, you raise pH, and then you add the wasted activated sludge in a future stage. In the end, you don't add any more disinfection or anything. The thing is, they're not expecting in this treatment line to have biological stabilization in this sludge line. So they have the activated sludge, but the sludge line itself, to treat the fecal sludge and the wasted sludge from the activated sludge, it doesn't have any biological step. It's just basically they add the calcium oxide, they take through sieves and grit tank gross materials, and then they already mix and throw it for thickening and drying. So I'm not sure if it will harm their process, but for sure it's not the best treatment line there is. I think they should still stabilize biologically the fecal sludge that they are receiving. And then if you add calcium oxide in the beginning, you should have some troubles with that. At the same time, adding calcium oxide to the end of the process, you can have interesting results in terms of soil conditioner, not only for nutrients present there, but also, I don't know if this is worldwide, but here we have in Brazil, it is common to add calcium oxide in the productions to correct the soil pH. So it's a 2-in-1 product. But this is how they implement it. So I'm systemizing these case studies, but I'm not involved in the project development itself.
Thanks for sharing that. I understand, and I had the same impression. So probably you can link us to learn more with the team from respective case study who has more experience and can share more details. Thank you.
Yes, I think in the case studies in SuSanA website, you have the information there and also the contacts from the people that are responsible for the initiatives. It will be very interesting to know the results as they start operation. Unfortunately, these case studies, they refer to the approach, to the configuration of the systems and the procedures to get there, but we still don't have results from the operating process.
Okay, so yes, if you are interested in having these FSM systematizations from Latin America, please visit our booth, SuSanA booth, and then you can download them. So please go to the booth now in these FSM 6 sessions. I have a comment in the chat. Let me see. Okay, so we have now we have to do the closing. So let me do a good closing. First, thank you for your participation, and a special thanks to Jan and Paola behind the screens, and of course to Tomas for the presentation and the exchange. With this, we have been able to share sustainable experiences in fecal sludge management in Latin America. We have seen that for efficient fecal sludge management, we still have challenges in terms of harmonized environmental policies, sharing services standards, developing public management models in sanitation, clarifying regulation and rates in the service chain, and developing capacities and knowledge of the different actors. But before closing, I really would like to reflect on environmental and human health. Let me just share my screen for the last time. And okay, so the evident changes in the climate system, global biodiversity, and geological process indicate that humans have radically altered the planet. But the ecological and water crisis is not the product of human action in general way, but rather of colonization, capitalism, and the denial of the relationship between human beings and animals and natural environment. What is the terra preta of the Amazon? More than 2,500 years ago, the indigenous settlements along the Amazon River with the production of food and subsistence practices deposited organic material as cassava hulls, cocoa, palm leaves, board logs and sticks, animal manure, fish bones, and also human excrement on the ground. Over the years, these deposits showed the impact of their transformation on the landscape and the soil on which people walk. Dark and fertile soils called a terra preta do indio today are highly valued for their high concentration of organic matter, phosphorus, and other macro and micronutrients available to the plants. The human population of the past altered soil in a way that increased their agricultural potential, and today terra preta is considered a model of sustainable agriculture. And the same happened in Japan and China between the 16th and 17th centuries, where agricultural communities used human excreta as fertilizer known as night soil, all those until the arrival of chemical fertilizers in the 20th century. So human beings are not necessarily a threat to the environment. And there are many models of environmental management that increase biodiversity and ecological diversity. This opened the door to the way and relationship in which we feed the earth and feed the fetus. This relationship was broken in the middle of the 19th century with the introduction of the toilet and the modern sewage system. The great fault of this system is that the main problem of water pollution was never solved. With the sewer, we all defecate in clean water daily at no cost. But how much does it cost to recover clean water? And the other problem is that all that organic material is treated as a worthless waste. So decentralized technology and the fecal sludge management take us on a path of recovery of the interaction between human beings and the earth. We must return to indigenous worldviews that teach us that there is no natural world separate from the socio-cultural activities of human beings. Everything is integrated. Our actions lead to consequences, even our visit to the bathrooms. This ecological crisis shows us that our bodily substances are necessary elements of our socio-ecological system, and we can no longer hide our waste. Protecting water and recovering nutrients is everybody's job. Together, we can generate greater impact, but first, we must recognize our relationship in synergy with the planet. So I invite those who are not yet members to register to SuSanA.com and to follow SuSanA Latinoamérica's networks on Facebook and Twitter to create an international interaction. If you are interested to the systematization, please also visit our booth, and there you can download them. Thank you for your participation in this webinar, and we'll be looking forward to meet you again in FSM 7.